So what is open close principle? It simply states that entities should be open for extension but closed for modification. So what do I mean by open for extension? It simply means changing the behavior of the entities should be easy. What do I mean by entities? Entities are nothing but just simply the classes, functions, methods, and that's it. Now what about the closed part? Closed for modification. This simply means whatever the extensions we are adding, right, those should be done without modifying the current source code. So how do you change the behavior without modifying the current source code? Let me show you how. Let's open any editor of your choice. I've already created one project which has nothing, just an empty Git repository. And let's create a file, client.js. Okay, so these principles, solid principles, shines with OOPS concepts. Okay, so that is why I'll give you an example in JavaScript with some OOPS concept, right? Not in a functional way. Okay, just to make it more clear and understandable. And since these principles are language agnostic, maybe we can tinker with some other language as well. We don't know. Okay, so let's say your boss gives you a requirement of developing an area calculator of squares. So later I'll show you the real world example as well. Okay, so let's say you design your LLD low level design, right? So something like this, and I usually start with my client code and then I implement the actual code, right? So imagine you have some area calculator, right? Which will be a class calculator, right? Something like this. And then in this area calculator, you have calculate method, right? Which will accept squares, right? And then the squares can be an array of object, right? So just to calculate this area, right? The area of the square is side square, right? So that I'll pass that side as a constructor argument. Okay, and it could be multiple. So also let's change this value to 10 and change this to 7. Okay, fine. Create a class called area calculator. Just to save time, I have created some snippets, right? So basically this is the area calculator, which has this calculate method which will accept these squares, right? And then basically we are just adding all the side square, right? Now let's create a square class with the constructor which will accept the side as a constructor argument. So let's try to run this code, and sure enough you see at the bottom 174, right? So sure enough our code works. And just to verify, let's do a simple math, right? So it should show 100. Okay, it's correct. Now after some time or after some days, right, so your boss comes and tells you that you want to have an ability to calculate the circles as well. Previously we were having the constraint that it will always have squares, but now there's a situation where we might have to pass a circle as well. The circle, maybe what we can do is we can have a constructor argument which will just pass as a radius, right? And then I can have a circle class, right, which will accept the radius. But now if you think here, right, so here we have the squares, right? The square is something wrong, the wording is wrong, right? Because it has circles as well, right? And now here this code will break. So for just to make it work, right, so let's do if the square instance of square, right, in that case do this, right? Otherwise you do math.py, right, and into square dot radius square, right? And basically this is wrong, so let's replace the square with shape, right, to make it more generic, to fit this naming convention properly, and it should be square, right? Okay, and now sure enough if I run it, our code is still working. So I can pass some easy number to calculate, right? And then pi's value is 3.14, radius is 10, so 3.14 into 100, 394, which is correct. Okay, so sure enough our code works for this, our code works for this as well, this as well. Now what if your boss comes and tells you that you need to incorporate this triangle as well? Now you see the pattern, right? So every time your boss comes to you and asking you to have one extra to like asking you to add one extra behavior. You're always changing your area calculator, and based on these shapes, right? So you always have to, maybe this time you have to do it like this, right? So this shape is type of triangle, then return something else, right? Now open close principle states that our code should be open for extension but closed for modification, right? So you see the pattern here, right? So whenever there is a requirement, we are changing the code, we are changing the actual client code, which is area calculator, right? So it is open for extension but not closed for a modification, because every time we have new requirement, we have to add new if statement, and basically that is mostly a trigger, right? So whenever you see something like that, right, so wherever you are checking the instance of or type of anything, and based on that you are doing something, right? So that is a hint that you are breaking one of the principles, right? So in JavaScript we don't have interfaces, right? So to simulate that, what I'll do is I'll create a shape class, okay, and which will have an area method, okay, and I'll just throw a new error, and I'll just add a message that implement this method, or let's call it function, okay? So a function in sub class, okay? So now what I can do is I can extend this square class, okay, with shape, and then I can have this area method here, right? And then this area method will simply return this, right? And here this shape should be this, okay? Same thing should be done for circle, and I forgot this, I need to call this super class, right? Super constructor, so that, okay, I'll not have any errors. I can call it here as well, and then I can have this extends keyword which will extend this shape class, right? And basically here I will have this logic where I don't need this carry, and this should be radius, right? And here this carry should be removed, right? So now basically what we have done is we have abstracted what is the different behavior inside an interface, right? So here is the area interface, right, which will be specific for each object, right, and which is different. Otherwise all the things will be same, okay? Now let's try to do some modifications here. Now this time we can just return carry plus shape dot area, right? Now you see here, whenever I have any shape, right, so because I'm extending this shape class, so I'll always have to implement this area method, okay? And if I implement this area method, then that means I have assurance here that I'll have area and I can call it easily, right? And now if I run it, sure enough our code is still working as expected. Now what if your boss comes and tells you that we want to work with triangles as well, right? So let's create a triangle, and what I'll do is I'll just to save time, I'll just copy some part of this, and then 0.5 into this dot base into this dot height, right? And then basically I can just pass triangle here, I did a typo there, triangle, and then I can have, let's use the easy number so that I can calculate things properly. And if I run it now, so sure enough you can see here 20 into 10, right? 200 divided by 2, which is 100. So our code is working fine, right? And now I can simply have liberty to pass any shape, right? Any shape, as in circle, square, or triangle, right? So this way you saw that, right? So whenever I want to extend any behavior, I can simply create a new class, right? Be it circle or be it triangle, right? Any shape I can create, any class I can create, and I can pass that class here itself, so that I don't have to update the existing code, right? And our code still works, right? And later, let's say boss comes and tells you that let's incorporate this rectangle as well, right? So let me copy this one and let's do this, right? Let's remove this part, and it should be width, right? And if I pass this rectangle as well, and it will have 10 and 20, our code is still working. Okay, 10 point, I did a typo here, okay. Now if you see, our code is still working, and to prove you see base into height, right? So you can calculate and pass any objects and still your code is working as expected. But the thing is, you're never changing your client code. Whenever you want to add any behavior, any functionality, you can create new class, and then you can start using that existing client code, right, without modifying it. So this is in a nutshell open close principle. Your classes or your entities, your functions should be open for extension but closed for modification.